I don't know about y'all, but a lot of my favorite Star Wars stories and characters have all come from the many different Star Wars animated series released over the years, and some fans, including myself, would even argue that animated Star Wars storytelling is Star Wars at its best, which seems all the more true when you take into consideration just how much the animated series have gone on to not only enhance the main films, but provide the introductions and lay the groundwork for so many of the stories and characters that are now leading Star Wars into the future. It's also crazy to note that at the time of making this video, we have no idea when or if we're even going to see a new Star Wars animated series anytime soon. But with the final season of The Bad Batch out of the way, I've been thinking a lot about the Star Wars animated series that came before and speculating about what Star Wars animated series could be next. So I thought it'd be fun to take a look back at all the Star Wars animated shows that have come and gone, starting all the way back in the 1980s through today, and speculate about what might be in store for the future of animated Star Wars storytelling. In this video, we're going to explore the history of Star Wars animation, starting with the past, moving into the present, and then the possibilities for the future. But before we get into it, welcome back to my channel. My name is Scotty Holiday. I'm a queer creator and a huge Star Wars nerd. So if you're into either one of those things, please consider liking, subscribing, and following me on social media at Scotty Holiday SW for all my latest Star Wars content. Starting at the very beginning, we have Star Wars Droids and Ewoks, two animated Star Wars series that began airing all the way back in September 1985 as a part of ABC's Ewoks and Droids Adventure Hour, ushering in the beginning of animated Star Wars storytelling for the small screen. Droids ran for one season, focusing on the adventures of R2-D2 and C-3PO between the events of Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, with Anthony Daniels returning as the voice of C-3PO. Unlike its sister series, Ewoks ran for 2 seasons until 1986, focusing on the adventures of Wicket and the other Ewoks on the Force Moon of Endor before the events of A New Hope. George Lucas was always interested in telling animated Star Wars stories, and after seeing the completed animated segment of the Star Wars Holiday Special, The Story of the Faithful Wookiee by Nelvana Animation Company, George hired them on to create both Droids and Ewoks, hoping to introduce a younger audience to the Star Wars galaxy. Both shows utilized 2D hand-drawn animation and were helmed by showrunners Mickey Herman and Peter Sauter. After Ewoks concluded in 1986, Star Wars wouldn't see another animated series until 18 years later with the debut of the Star Wars Clone Wars microseries by Genndy Tartakovsky in 2003. The microseries ran from November 2003 to March 2005 on Cartoon Network, consisting of 25 3 to 5 minute episodes bridging the gap between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, depicting different battles and strategies during the Clone Wars. The art style of this series was heavily influenced by Tartakovsky's signature Samurai Jack 2D animation and would go on to inspire future animated Star Wars storytelling in the years to come. Perhaps the most popular and longest standing of the Star Wars animated series thus far, Star Wars The Clone Wars debuted in 2008, with a full-length animated feature film followed by a series of the same name from October 2008 to May 2020 for a total of 7 seasons. Seasons 1 through 5 aired from October 2008 to March 2013 on Cartoon Network until the series' cancellation following Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilm. Season 6, aptly titled The Lost Missions, debuted on Netflix in March 2014, with many of the untold and unfinished arcs being adapted for various books and comics. However, in an unexpected move from Disney, The Clone Wars returned for a surprise 7th and final season 6 years later in May 2020 for Disney+. Like its predecessor, the Clone Wars series is set between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, with episodes focusing on different aspects of the war, fleshing out stories of Force users, soldiers, politicians, and bounty hunters in an anthology style. The Clone Wars is the only Star Wars animated series created and executively produced by George Lucas, and serves as an introduction to fan-favorite characters such as Ahsoka Tano and Clone Captain Rex, as well as the cutting-edge computer-generated animation style that has since become synonymous with Star Wars animation ever since. Many of the characters created for the Clone Wars series have also gone on to appear in other Star Wars media, from additional animated series, video games, books, and comics, with some even making the jump to live action as well. Following the Clone Wars cancellation in 2013, Star Wars Animation returned shortly after in the form of Star Wars Rebels, a brand new series that ran from October 2014 to March 2018 for 4 seasons on Disney XD. Rebels was created by Clone Wars supervising director and executive producer Dave Filoni, as well as Simon Kinberg and Carrie Beck, set between the events of Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. This series introduced us to the Ghost Crew and the beginnings of the Rebel Alliance in their fight against the Empire, as well as the return of Clone Wars favorites like Ahsoka Tano, Captain Rex, and Maul, just to name a few. Rebels also served as the canon introduction to the Inquisitorius, as well as Grand Admiral Thrawn, a character originally introduced in the now Legends Thrawn trilogy of books released in the 90s by Timothy Zahn. This series also debuted a new CG animation style, taking heavy inspiration from the original Star Wars concept art by Ralph McQuarrie, most notably with the design of Darth Vader's helmet and characters such as Zeb and the astromech Chopper. Though Rebels only lasted 4 seasons, many fans have dubbed the live-action Ahsoka series as a spiritual successor or Rebels Season 5, since it expanded upon so many of the characters and concepts first introduced in the Rebels series finale epilogue. Just months after the Star Wars Rebels conclusion, we were introduced to Star Wars Resistance, another new animated series that ran for 2 seasons from October 2018 to January 2020 on Disney XD, as well as the Disney Channel. Resistance was created by Clone Wars and Rebels alum Dave Filoni and tells the story of Kazuda Xiono and the inhabitants of the Colossus refueling station in the time leading up to the events of The Force Awakens, where the Resistance is still learning about the growing threat of the First Order. This series once again introduced us to a brand new CG animation style, though this time inspired by Japanese anime, and is the only Star Wars series thus far to exist within the timeline of the sequel trilogy. Following the Clone Wars series revival and the final season in May 2020, Lucasfilm debuted Star Wars The Bad Batch, a Clone Wars spin-off series that ran for 3 seasons from May 2021 to May 2024. The Bad Batch tells the story of Clone Force 99, a group of genetically enhanced clone troopers finding their way through the rapidly changing galaxy in the aftermath of the Clone War, set between the events of Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. Created by Star Wars animation alum Dave Filoni along with Jennifer Corbett, The Bad Batch was also the first original Star Wars animation series to debut on Disney streaming platform Disney+. Along with being a spin-off of the Clone Wars series, The Bad Batch saw the return of the Clone Wars animation style, as well as Clone Wars fan-favorite characters like Captain Rex, Gungi, Senator Ryo Chuchi, and most recently, the return of Asajj Ventress following her supposed death in the Clone Wars novel Dark Disciple. The series also featured Star Wars Rebels characters Hera Syndulla and Chopper, and introduced audiences to a new unaltered, yet enhanced, female clone of Jango Fett named Omega. The Bad Batch is the first Star Wars animated series to build upon its predecessor as well, taking unfinished or untold stories from the Clone Wars series and implementing them into its own story, which I've actually done an entire video on that I'll link in the cards if you're interested in checking it out. The launch of Disney Plus also saw the beginning of Star Wars dive into non-canonical storytelling with the debut of Star Wars Visions, a collection of short films reflecting different cultural perspectives of Star Wars created and told by different animation studios around the world. Visions Volume 1 dropped in September 2021, followed by Volume 2 in May 2023. And while the series is still in active development at the time of making this video, we have yet to receive an official announcement for a Volume 3 from Lucasfilm. I really love the stories and ideas Visions brought into the Star Wars universe, and I hope that Lucasfilm eventually gives some of the studios involved the opportunity to continue the shorts they created for the series. I'd personally love to get a continuation, or even a full-length animated movie based off The Ninth Jedi by Kenji Kamiyama and the production IG Studio. A second studio I'd love to see given the opportunity to create an animated Star Wars film is Studio Ghibli. And after the release of Zen, Grogu, and Dust Bunnies in November 2022, and Hayao Miyazaki announcing that he's no longer retired for the 5th time, the chances are a lot more likely. Another new Star Wars series to utilize what's been dubbed as the Clone Wars animation style is Star Wars Tales. This series debuted on Disney Plus in October 2020 with Tales of the Jedi, a series of 6 animated anthology shorts created by Dave Filoni, focusing on Ahsoka Tano and Dooku, providing both characters with 3 episodes each to tell their stories. After announcing a second season at Star Wars Celebration London in 2023, Tales of the Empire was eventually announced with a surprise trailer set to debut on May 4th, 2024. Tales of the Empire will follow the same anthology format as Tales of the Jedi, but this time focusing on the fallen Jedi Barriss Offee and Morgan Elsbeth. There's currently no official confirmation from Disney or Lucasfilm whether or not Tales of the Empire will serve as the second season of Tales of the Jedi or as its own series entirely, but the concept of Star Wars Tales could usher in a new form of animated Star Wars storytelling for years to come. This now brings us to the most recent and what I believe is the most unique Star Wars animated series thus far, Young Jedi Adventures. Young Jedi Adventures debuted in May 2023 on Disney Plus and Disney Junior, giving Star Wars fans their first look at High Republic storytelling on screen, as well as a brand new CG animation style. The series follows Jedi younglings and their adventures on the path to becoming Jedi Knights, featuring a handful of characters from the High Republic Publishing Initiative that began back in January 2021. Young Jedi Adventures is also the first Star Wars animated series made to appeal to the preschooler/grade school demographic, and the first Star Wars series by showrunner and executive producer Michael Olson. Now, before we get into speculation for the future of Star Wars animation, let me know down in the comments which Star Wars animated series has been your favorite so far. So, at this point, where does Star Wars animation go from here? Since announcing the third and final season of The Bad Batch in April 23 at Star Wars Celebration London, Lucasfilm and Disney have yet to announce any plans for the future of Star Wars animated storytelling, which has left a lot of fans, including myself, asking ourselves, what's next? On top of this, back in 2023, news broke that Lucasfilm would be closing its Singapore VFX and animation studio, a studio known for their work on the 2008 Clone Wars animated series, laying off around 300 employees in an attempt to consolidate its global footprint due to economic factors affecting the industry, as stated by Disney, Lucasfilm's parent company. The shutdown is credited to the ongoing restructuring of the entertainment industry as a whole due to the decline of cable television and physical media for the streaming method, a reconstructing that ultimately led to the US writers and actors strikes in the same year. And while we have yet to see how or if the shutdown is going to affect Star Wars animated storytelling going forward, the increasing number of Star Wars live-action series on Disney Plus and Dave Filoni's recent promotion to Chief Creative Officer of Lucasfilm in 2023 have left us with a lot of unknowns. Focusing on Dave Filoni, who is arguably the poster boy for Star Wars animation, we've seen him take a huge step back from Star Wars animation following The Bad Batch Season 1 in 2023 for the live-action series including The Mandalorian Seasons 2 and 3, the Ahsoka series, and the upcoming Mandoverse movie. But how exactly will this affect Star Wars animation going forward? After the conclusion of the first season of The Bad Batch, Jennifer Corbett has essentially become the go-to person for Star Wars animation since she's one of the series' executive producers, and she, along with Brad Rau, another executive producer and series director, have kind of become the two people in the spotlight for Season 3's marketing, doing interviews for StarWars.com and various other publications. So based on their various interviews and the connected stories Star Wars has been telling across recent media, it seems there are a couple logical possibilities of where Star Wars animation could go from here, with the most plausible revolving around the return of fan favorite character Asajj Ventress. Ventress's return came as a huge surprise to the fandom when she was revealed back in the Bad Batch Season 3 trailer that dropped in January 2024, and immediately after it was revealed, StarWars.com published an article specifically addressing Ventress's shocking return, quote from Brad Rau saying, "We love Asajj Ventress. She's a character that we've been wanting to tell more stories about. We don't want to spoil anything, but want fans to know that any new storytelling with Ventress will align with the events of Star Wars Dark Disciple." So right out the gate, Lucasfilm wanted fans to know that Ventress was indeed back from her supposed death in Dark Disciple, and that her return would align with the events of the novel. Not only was her reveal one of, if not the standout moment from the Bad Batch Season 3 trailer, it got the entire fandom talking about Asajj Ventress, which I'm sure Lucasfilm knew it would, hence why they revealed her involvement in the first place and immediately published the article addressing it. By 2024, Ventress has been presumed dead for almost 10 years by the fandom, or at least to those who read Dark Disciple in 2015, while the more casual fans were left even more in the dark wondering what happened to Ventress after the Clone Wars and why they never saw her again in other Star Wars media. But following her return in Season 3's Episode 9, The Harbinger, many fans began calling the episode a backdoor pilot for whatever animated Star Wars series was to come next, starring, or at the very least, including Ventress. Funny enough, this wasn't actually the first time Star Wars Animation considered bringing Ventress back, and in 2021, during an interview with the Friends of the Force podcast, executive producer and head writer of the show Star Wars Resistance, Brandon Auman, revealed that Dave Filoni actually had the idea to bring Ventress back for Resistance. Auman explained that the character Mika Gray was originally intended to be Ventress, and along with bringing her back from the dead, she was also going to duel Kylo Ren. But Filoni ultimately sided against it, worrying that Ventress would take away from the other characters and the story the series was trying to tell. Pablo Hidalgo of the Lucasfilm Story Group retroactively confirmed this claim, explaining that Mika Gray evolved from imagining what Asajj Ventress would be like had she survived into this era, in an article on StarWars.com about the Resistance Season 2 episode, The Relic Raider. The same day The Harbinger dropped, StarWars.com published an article discussing the episode, containing interviews with Jennifer Brad Rau, as well as Ventress's voice actress Nika Futterman, discussing their love for the character, how her return came to be, and a handful of teases for her future in Star Wars storytelling. Jennifer Corbett explained that she, Dave Filoni, and Brad Rau had several conversations about Dark Disciple and how Ventress's story could continue, saying how Ventress survived will be revealed in future content. But for this story, we were thrilled to include her and explore her unique connection to and compassion for Omega. And so far, that's exactly what we got in The Harbinger. The article finishes saying, though Ventress walks away from the Bad Batch and Omega in the end, there's a feeling that the future is wide open. And this all leads us into how Asajj Ventress will play into the future of Star Wars animation. With Jennifer Corbett's confirmation that Ventress's survival would be revealed in future content, fans began to speculate that Ventress could be featured in Tales of the Jedi Season 2. However, this theory was mostly put to rest after the Tales of the Empire trailer dropped. Another theory that's been floating around is an animated series following Asajj Ventress training Omega in the ways of the Force, possibly as her own apprentice, following the events of the Bad Batch Season 3, might actually be at the center of Star Wars' next animated series, and here's why. Upon their encounter in The Harbinger, Ventress and Omega connected through the episode with Omega's overwhelming positivity and kind nature, playing off Ventress's dry and sarcastic demeanor, complementing each other extremely well. Omega even makes the comment that Ventress likes the Batch, or else she wouldn't have stayed on Pabu to continue testing her abilities after a scuffle with Hunter, Crosshair, and Wrecker earlier in the episode. In The Harbinger, Ventress gives Omega 3 different tests, with the first test harkening back to Luke Skywalker teaching Rey in The Last Jedi, all the way down to the visual cues, and though the second test feels more inconsequential, the third test is where Ventress really gets to shine. After Omega taunts Ventress about her own abilities, Ventress uses the Force to connect with the creatures in the ocean below, causing a school of luminescent rays to swim toward the water's surface around their boat. But another creature connects with Ventress as well, a menacing and gigantic Varathian that begins to attack their boat, causing it to capsize. It's in this moment that Ventress uses the Force to connect with the creature, showing off not only her strength, but balance within the Force, akin to Yoda pulling Luke's X-Wing out of the Dagobah swamp, another parallel to the master and apprentice relationship. Following the tests, Ventress tells the Batch that Omega's midichlorian count isn't all that impressive, but Crosshair calls her bluff, with Ventress explaining that the truth of Omega's M count and potential would result in her having to leave the Batch behind, something both the Batch and Ventress herself would never ask Omega to choose. We as the audience know there's more to Omega's favorable M count that Ventress leads on in the episode, especially since we know that Omega's blood is the key to Project Necromancer. But where does Omega go from here? Prior to the Bad Batch series finale, I, along with a lot of other fans, speculated that Omega might go off to find Ventress after the events of Season 3 to explore her connection to the Force in a brand new animated series. But the Season 3 epilogue already gave us a small glimpse into Omega's future, showing an emotional goodbye with Hunter before leaving Pabu to become a pilot in the Rebel Alliance. And while there's definitely still a good chunk of time between the Season 3 finale and the epilogue for an Omega Ventress series to take place, the chances seem a lot less likely, with an adult Omega seeming more interested in flying than the Force. I also can't see Lucasfilm making the decision to end the Bad Batch just to have a sequel series solely focused on Omega, at least not right away. Another animated series idea I've seen being talked about in the Star Wars fandom is a series following Rex's clone rebellion with other surviving clones such as Echo and Hauser in their quest to free the clones from Imperial control and their inhibitor chips. And while I like this idea as well, I also can't see Star Wars doing another animated series about clones so soon either. Bringing the focus back to Ventress though, the possibilities are really endless, and I believe there's one specific idea for an animated series involving Ventress that outshines them all. Disney is really into yellow lightsabers and Night Sisters right now, but something else we've seen pop up in a lot of recent Star Wars stories is the hidden path. And I believe Asajj Ventress is the key to tying it all together, leading an animated Star Wars anthology series all about the hidden path. For those who don't know, the Hidden Path is the secret underground network that worked to shelter Jedi and other Force sensitives from the Empire through hidden locations across the galaxy. The Path was first introduced in the 2022 Obi-Wan Kenobi series, playing a larger role in episodes 3 through 6, but played an even bigger role a year later in the game Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Throughout the Hidden Path safe houses shown in the Kenobi series, the walls were covered in carvings left by travelers, so of course the hardcore Star Wars fans had to try and decode the Arabesh to see what possible hints or Easter eggs they might uncover. Surprisingly, both Jedi Masters Cere Junda and Eno Cordova from the Star Wars Jedi games names were among the carvings, at the time unsuspectingly teasing their involvement with the path, which we would learn about a year later when Star Wars Jedi Survivor dropped. But one particular Jedi Survivor got a name drop in the series by Obi-Wan Kenobi himself.
Quinlan was here.
Quinlan Vos. In the series, Tala Dureth tells Obi-Wan that Quinlan helps the Hidden Path from time to time, not only confirming Quinlan Vos's involvement, but his survival 10 years after the events of Order 66. So at this point, you might be asking, what exactly does Asajj Ventress have to do with the Hidden Path? And the answer is Quinlan Vos. For those who aren't familiar with the story of Dark Disciple, Quinlan Vos and Ventress team up to assassinate Count Dooku at the behest of the Jedi High Council, but end up falling in love along the way, with Ventress sacrificing herself to save Vos from Count Dooku's deadly Force lightning attack. So it would make sense that her and Vos would meet again after she was brought back to life, especially after learning about the Great Jedi Purge. Ventress also has a huge soft spot for children ripped away from their families against their will, especially Force sensitives, because of how much it relates to her own childhood trauma and the continued abandonment she experienced throughout her life up until the events of the Dark Disciple novel. We saw the beginnings of her character shift in the Clone Wars Season 4 episode Bounty, and then again at the end of the Clone Wars Season 5, where she helps Ahsoka Tano after being framed for the bombing of the Jedi Temple. We saw her empathy and selflessness overtake her many times throughout Dark Disciple, and even now most recently with Omega in the Bad Batch Season 3. So at this point in her life, there's no way I can see Ventress sitting back and doing nothing to help the Force-sensitive children of the galaxy from being hunted down and ripped away from their families for the Empire. Plus, with a little convincing from Vos, who we know is actively working with the Hidden Path, there's no way Ventress could say no, even if she only agrees begrudgingly at first. We know that at the time the Bad Batch Season 3 takes place, the Empire is working with Class 1 bounty hunters to obtain high M-count targets to be used as a part of the secret project Necromancer, a project Asajj Ventress is somewhat aware of, and though it's framed in Season 3's Episode 8 that she's among these Class 1 hunters working for the Empire, I believe she's actually using the intel from the Empire's bounty to locate their targets and get them into hiding, possibly with the help of the Hidden Path, before the Empire can get to them. Jennifer Corbett has already confirmed that we will learn how Ventress survived after her fatal sacrifice in Dark Disciple in future content, and because we know that Nika Futterman is back to play the character, it's extremely likely, if not proven, that Ventress' story will continue to be told in animation. But in order to explain how Ventress survived, Star Wars will have to explain how she died to begin with for fans who haven't read the Dark Disciple novel, and this is something I've been begging for ever since I finished the book for the first time. I definitely think it's a lot more likely now than ever before that we could see events from Dark Disciple on screen, but I imagine that if we do, it would come as a highlight reel or vision for Asajj at the beginning of the series, shortly before we're shown how she was brought back to life. Think Book of Boba Fett back to Tank Vision, but instead it's Asajj drifting through an ethereal Night Sister afterlife or purgatory before suddenly awakening and emerging from one of Dathomir's black pools. I could see them showing other never-before glimpses into Asajj's past, including events from the book throughout the series as well. But regardless of how they do it, we need to see Ventress and Vos on screen together in an animated Star Wars project at some point. There's no question. On top of bringing characters like Asajj Ventress and Quinlan Vos, an animated anthology series about the Hidden Path could also involve Omega and the other Force-sensitive children kept in the vault on Mount Tantus, and even more well-known characters such as Cal Kestis, Marin, and maybe even Barriss Offee, especially after her arc in Tales of the Empire. A series about the Path would also give Lucasfilm the chance to flesh out lesser-known characters such as Tala Dureth, Quallen Roken, Haja Estri, Jedi Master Cere Junda, Jedi Master Ena Cordova, and even Reva, depending on the timeline the show would take place. I could even see a series about the Path including clones as well. Hell, Dave Filoni could even bring Ahsoka in for an episode or two. And with the return of Barriss Offee and her redemption seen in Tales of the Empire, I just really want to see her, Ahsoka, and Ventress all healed from their traumas, working together to make the galaxy a better place, and an anthology series about the Hidden Path seems like the perfect place to do it. A series about Asajj Ventress and the Hidden Path also has a great group of villains already set up as well between the Bounty Hunters and Inquisitorius, which would also allow for the series to show how the Empire transitioned from using the Bounty Hunters and then moving to the Inquisitors for their high M count targets. On top of fan favorite Bounty Hunters like Cad Bane, Boba Fett, and Fennec Shand, this potential series could flesh out some lesser known Bounty Hunters from the Clone Wars era as well as those seen in the original trilogy. We also have plenty of Inquisitors to choose from across the various forms of Star Wars media, such as the live action shows, animation, games, books, and comics. We all know Star Wars loves to include new or lesser known trooper designs as well for each new series they put out, and this series would be the perfect opportunity to include the Purge troopers and maybe even Royal Guards, two sects that we don't see nearly enough of in Star Wars on-screen media. And lastly, from a business standpoint, a show about the Hidden Path would make sense. Not only does Lucasfilm already have a lot of the assets, this animated series would cost way less than another live action show, and it's also a low risk, high payoff idea. A series about the Hidden Path has the potential to be the ultimate Star Wars crossover between Star Wars animation with the Clone Wars, the Bad Batch, and Rebels, live action with the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, and the Star Wars video games Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, as well as a chance just to bring in so many fan favorite characters in an anthology series format. Bringing Ventress back was a big deal, not only for Lucasfilm, but for fans of the character as well, and seeing how she survived, reuniting with Quinlan Vos, and a potential future with Omega and or the Hidden Path after the events of the Bad Batch Season 3 sounds pretty great right now to me as a Star Wars fan. Of course, there's the option to explore a completely new time period or even take a break from Star Wars animation altogether, but I can't see Disney and Lucasfilm passing up the chance to combine so many beloved Star Wars stories and characters into one amazing animated series. But where would you like to see Star Wars animation venture to next? Do you want to see a series about Asajj Ventress and the Hidden Path, or are you hoping for something completely new? Let me know down in the comments below, or join my Discord to continue the conversation there. Make sure to like, subscribe, and consider following me on social media at ScottyHolidaySW for all my latest Star Wars content. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, may the Force be with you.